Yeah, so it's late, it's Tuesday evening, you're all still here. Thank you for being here. Thank you to David for doing genuinely a sterling work, putting on an excellent programme. And also for those of you who, I'm sure everybody in the room has, but like hasn't checked out David's new website, I was just sending it to everyone. It's a beautiful piece of work and it's really inspiring, and generally I have been sharing it far and wide. I'm going to be really brief because it's late, and also I'm keen to hear what you guys have to say. And also, like a lot of people on the panel, I'm no expert in reindustrialisation, but I am kind of moving in this direction, and I'll explain why. So I'm going to talk really briefly about two things. The first thing is one of the countries that hasn't been mentioned today, and that country is Germany. It's a country where I used to live, and I find it pretty inspiring on a lot of things we've been talking about, because I think for all the twists and turns in the German story, especially through reunification, they haven't lost their cultural memory and political instinct for industry and for taking industry seriously. And we hear a lot about that when we look to Germany for kind of industrial policy, but I think it runs very deep in the German psyche. And then I'll go on to explain why I'm currently at Compass, as David said, but I'm about to leave Compass, and I'm fundraising for a new project which hopefully draws some of the themes of things we've been talking about today. And that's what I'll end on. So to just say something really briefly about Germany and how that has inspired me. So as many of you will know, Germany is the most, well, arguably the most decentralised country in Europe. We are the most centralised country in Europe. So to that extent, there is both not very much we can learn from Germany and everything we can learn from Germany, which is we should decentralise, because that really helps with our industrial policy, especially with regional inequality. And something that really shocked me when I learned it, that is definitely true, is nowadays the cultural, economic and political inequalities between East and West Germany are less than the political and economic inequalities between North and South England. And I come from North England, just in Greater Manchester over the hill, and I think that's something that should shock people, given the kind of traumatic legacy of the wall in Germany and what happened, but they've recovered much quicker. And part of that is a very front-footed, kind of proactive reindustrialisation strategy. So, as I've said, there's obviously this fissure down German history where you've got these two countries, two states which were held apart from each other. But of course that is building on a legacy and a history of Germany, which is actually a history of autonomous states. So Germany is best thought of, obviously, as not really one country. It's relatively recent, 1848. In recent German history, we can think about the fact that it wasn't really one country, a bit like the United States. It always has this federated mindset of all these different nations coming together. And that's really important because on a cultural basis as well as on a political basis, these different states in Germany consider themselves to be different states who have come together. Deutschland über alles actually isn't about Germany conquering the rest of the world, it's actually about Germany as a unified country beyond the local states. So that's actually what that originally meant. And they have this policy, therefore, of federal economic equalisation payments, which is a very long-winded way of saying they move money between different states. So it's a kind of solidarity mechanism by helping different regions and states in Germany who might not be doing so well. That has caused, understandably, quite a lot of tension in 2020. There was 4 net contributors to that, and the rest of the 16 states were kind of beneficiaries of it. So of course there's a lot of cultural and political friction between the different states. But increasingly in the past few years, what you've seen, and this is why I wrote this report back in 2022, you've seen the German government try to get more proactive about putting East Germany in the driving seat of reindustrialisation, and especially in jobs of the future. So what they're trying to combat here is what in German was called defizitorientierte Politik. So you can kind of understand that as deficit-orientated policy or politics, which is people looked in quite a patronising way, which is quite reminiscent of the relationship between North and South here in England as well, at East Germany, and saying, you need our help. So there's quite a paternalistic attitude. And a lot of what politicians from the East were saying, well, actually, no, we actually had this long tradition of industry and innovation and experimentation in this country. And we want our people to understand that and know that culturally and politically and socially. We shouldn't feel like we're just taking from West Germany, because frankly it's also not true. What I really liked about this policy, therefore, it quite pompously called the Great Transformation, which I kind of love because it's very German. I don't think that would fly in England. But I kind of love the ambition of that, and what they're trying to do with that is say climate transition and reindustrialisation go hand in hand, which is a common thread from what we've heard today. We're looking to the future, but we're also, as David was saying, and as you've just said, we're drawing on the past to help us move into the next phase of our development. And I found that really inspiring because it not only is about a front-footed industrialisation policy, which we heard from Mark earlier, you need to put your finger on the scales and governments can do that. It's also quite sensitive about the political and cultural ramifications of that. So not only are they piling investment into these regions, semiconductor factories, a lot of renewables, high-level engineering jobs, they're also trying to mirror that through cultural interventions. So get radio, TV, the equivalent of the BBC moving to Salford and having more programmes made in the north, about the north of England. Germany have been doing that too, and it's having really interesting consequences in terms of what the public are talking about there and seeing this great transformation happening through their TV and radio. So what can we learn in the UK about that? Well, the project that I am currently moving towards starting up is something which is taken from this experience in Germany and also borrows from what has already been mentioned, the Biden administration's quite ambitious and full-throated defence of industry. And it's a project basically directly nicked from the US in terms of its framing, but it's something that I've tried to add to. So Biden had a project back in 2023 called the US Climate Corps. It was obviously borrowing a lot from the Civilian Conservation Corps of the 1930s and the FDR era. And that was about, back in the day, in the 1930s, it was about getting 3 million young men across the country to build the national parks and to rebuild the country after the Great Depression. And it has a big cultural legacy, psychological and political legacy for Americans. And they had also great badges and merch and uniform. And you'll see the pictures of them out on the land. And it was very kind of romantic and beautiful. But what a lot of that was saying was it takes working class people to make the nation, literally with their bodies and with their skills and with their hands and with their minds. And I think that the US does that pretty well. So I've essentially kind of taken that idea, imported it here to the UK, and I'm trying to plug that into the context of Greater Manchester. Why Greater Manchester? Well, Greater Manchester is the fastest growing part of the economy outside London. It's also the area where I'm from, so I'm quite familiar with it. And what I'm particularly passionate about is this programme is about matching young people between the ages of 18 and 25 with jobs in climate. But not only is that about the jobs you would think of when people say climate jobs, like renewables, retrofit, heat pumps, engineering jobs, green construction, it's also about land-based jobs. So this is wildfire prevention, increasingly a problem in my part of the world where I grew up. There's increasing numbers of wildfires because of climate change. Flood prevention, huge issue in Greater Manchester. And also sustainable agriculture. So putting under one banner, not just the high-tech and digital and engineering jobs, but also saying land-based jobs in terms of climate transition are part of what we need. And then the extra piece that I want to bring to it is, why not give a bunch of these young people who are not taking the university route, going the vocational route, organising leadership development? Because what you get in universities is some time to work on yourself and figure out who you are and investment in you as an individual. And there's a social cohort effect of feeling like you're mixing with your peers, you're getting to know people, you're frankly having fun. That's why a lot of people go to university. It's not always some high-minded thing about getting a good job and educating yourself, it's also just having a good time. That's why I went to uni. And 2/3 of young people in Greater Manchester don't go to university. It's one of the highest in the country, which is sometimes surprising to people because Manchester punches above its weight academically in terms of having really great universities there, but actually a large proportion of the students there don't come from the Greater Manchester area. So where am I at with this? Well, Andy Burnham, as many of you have seen, he's not been shy in the last few weeks of being out and about. He has put a lot of political capital behind the idea of skills, education and vocational training. He's got this thing called the MBAC that is really moving with the grain of saying to young people, actually, there's a line of sight from taking these subjects at school at the age of 14 through to really great, well-paying, unionised jobs of the future in climate and other things. And I'm trying to map that onto that and say, can we run a little pilot in Manchester to see if we can match, our back of the envelope calculation is, small scale pilots, so around 300 or 400 young people matched with jobs in climate, and then take a bunch of those young people, around 80 of them, through this organising training, kind of see what happens. See whether we can also develop some future leaders, to be honest, because what we've heard about today is also this lack of pipeline for young people, trade unions, like my grandfather was a shop steward and that's how he got politicised, and that was all exactly part of the course, was that you would go through that route and that would be part of your development as a leader. Well, you know, frankly, we should be investing in those working class young people who are going to help us get out of the climate mess that we're in. They're the people who are going to help us with this transition. And very finally, to make a very political point, I think we need to be much more front-footed about this when it comes to taking on reform, because then you can stand up and say to reform, you know, who can argue with unionised, well-paid jobs of the future for working class young people in Greater Manchester? I'd like to see them come out and make climate an issue in that respect. So I think we're not at that place where the US is about climate becoming quite a polarised issue, but we could be there. We shouldn't be complacent about that. And actually the best way you can answer that is by having working class young people be the leaders of that movement rather than progressive think tanks. I think you're often very far away from the jobs and skills and knowledge that is needed to take us through this transition period. So that's what I'm kind of trying to fundraise for. I'm hoping to start a pilot for this next academic year, so this time next year. And if anybody has any connections or is interested or wants to keep in contact with the project, just do get in touch. And thanks, David, so much for inviting me.